Okay, so I'm going to start this video at the end, October 20th, 1944. A general wades through warm Pacific surf onto a beach. He grabs a radio microphone and he says, and I'm quoting him directly here, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." That moment was broadcast across the entire Pacific. It was one of the most theatrical moments in military history, and it happened right here on Leyte. But here's the thing nobody ever asks. Why Leyte? Out of over 7,000 Philippine islands, why this one? What made this exact patch of land, this island that barely shows up on most maps, so important that the fate of an entire world war was decided here? And here's the even bigger question, the one that'll actually blow your mind before we're done today. How did this island even get here in the first place? Because about 50 million years ago, Leyte didn't exist, not even close. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to know something that most people, even most Filipinos, have never fully put together. The true origin story of Leyte. And it starts not with humans, but with fire, oceans, and tectonic plates colliding in the dark. Alright, let's go way back, embarrassingly far back. We're talking 50 to 60 million years ago, long before humans, long before any civilization, long before anyone was around to care. There's just ocean, relentless, churning, planet-sized ocean. And underneath it, the most destructive slow-motion collision you can possibly imagine. The Philippine archipelago, all 7,641 islands of it, didn't form the way most landmasses do. It didn't break off from a supercontinent, it wasn't always there. Instead, it was built from scratch by some of the most violent geological forces on Earth. Here's how it works, simplified. You've got the Philippine Sea Plate moving westward. You've got the Eurasian Plate. They're colliding. When oceanic plates collide like this, one goes under the other. That's called subduction. And the friction, heat, the pressure, it creates volcanoes. And over millions of years, those volcanoes pile up, cool down, and eventually poke their heads above the ocean surface. That's an island. That is exactly how Leyte was born. But Leyte's story is even more specific than that. Scientists have actually drilled down into Leyte's bedrock, and what they found underneath everything is something called ophiolite. Basically, it's ancient ocean floor that got scraped up and shoved onto the plate as these tectonic forces collided. Leyte's basement rock, the very foundation of the island, dates back to about 50 million years ago. That means this island has been building itself for 50 million years. And here's something worth sitting with. Leyte sits on top of what scientists call the Philippine Mobile Belt, one of the most geologically restless zones on the entire planet. The island isn't finished forming. Earthquakes still happen regularly. Nearby volcanic systems are still active. Leyte is a geological work in progress, and it has been for 50 million years. The rock layers of southern Leyte tell a story of ocean basin formations, volcanic island arcs, and tectonic collisions stacked on top of one another over incomprehensible timescales. This isn't just an island. It's basically a geological masterpiece built by forces so enormous they're almost impossible to comprehend. So yeah, the next time someone asks where Leyte came from, the technically correct answer is from the bottom of the ocean, courtesy of 50 million years of tectonic rage. And then, something even more remarkable happened. Life arrived. Real quick, before we move on, drop something in the comments. Did you know about Leyte before this video? And where are you watching from right now? Seriously, I read every single one of these. I'll be down there. Okay, so the island exists. It's got mountains, jungle, rivers, coastline, and honestly, it's gorgeous. But at this point in the story, there's nobody home. So, who showed up first? Archaeological evidence from the eastern Visayas region, found at the Sohoton Caves in nearby Samar, has been dated to around 8,550 BC. That's over 10,000 years ago. Think about that. While people in the ancient Near East were just beginning to experiment with agriculture, human beings were already living, hunting, and surviving in the islands surrounding what is now Leyte. The Waray people, the indigenous inhabitants of Leyte, didn't arrive in one dramatic wave. The Austronesian migration into the Philippine archipelago started around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, and these were not primitive people paddling around on logs. The Austronesians were among the most skilled seafarers in human history. They crossed open ocean in outrigger vessels, navigating by stars, by wind patterns, by the behavior of ocean swells. No compass, no instruments, no GPS. Just knowledge, passed down across generations, sharp enough to cross the entire Pacific. They settled from Madagascar to Easter Island, and the Philippines sat right in the middle of that extraordinary migration corridor. By the time these Austronesian settlers established themselves on Leyte, they weren't primitive. They had agriculture, they had organized social hierarchies, they traded. The Waray people were not isolated. They were plugged into a wide maritime trade network that stretched to China, Borneo, and the Malay world. Long before any European ever heard of the Philippines, Leyte was already part of a regional economy. And the clearest proof of that organized civilization? A place called Leyte. The name literally translates to Land of Ite, named for a chieftain called Datu Ite. Leyte was centered in what is now present-day Tacloban, the regional capital. Historians identify it as the oldest city-state in the entire eastern Visayas region. People were governing this spot for over 1,000 years before the Spanish ever arrived. And then there's this amazing story recorded by a 17th century Jesuit priest named Father Ignacio Alsina. He documented the legend of Datu Samanga of Leyte, who reportedly courted a princess from the island of Bohol by leading a raid on Imperial China. He crossed the South China Sea to raid China to impress a girl. And apparently it worked, because they got married and founded a kingdom. What a flex. Whether that legend is literal history or embellished, it tells us something important. These were not isolated people. The Waray people of Leyte weren't trading with China, with Borneo, with the Malays. They were part of a wide network of Asian maritime commerce long before Spain ever showed up. Leyte was already cosmopolitan before it having European name. Now here's where the story takes its most famous and honestly most underappreciated turn. Because this island isn't just connected to Philippine history, it's connected to the name of the Philippines. March 16, 1521. A Portuguese explorer sailing under the Spanish crown drops anchor at a small, uninhabited island called Haiyan, positioned right at the entrance to Leyte Gulf. His name is Ferdinand Magellan, and his fleet is at this point absolutely wrecked. They just crossed the entire Pacific Ocean, a crossing so brutal that crew members were dying of scurvy, drinking yellow, bilge-fouled water, and reportedly eating rats and leather off the ship's rigging. Magellan rested at Haiyan for 8 days. Local boats arrived from nearby settlements, friendly, curious, willing to trade food and supplies. These Visayan traders weren't afraid of the Spanish ships. They'd seen foreign traders before, because Leyte and the surrounding region had been trading with the wider Asian world for centuries. To them, these were just different-looking merchants. From Haiyan, Magellan sailed to Limasawa, small island sitting just off the southern tip of Leyte. And on March 31st, 1521, the first Catholic Mass in the Philippines was celebrated right there. Christianity in the Philippines, which today makes it one of the only majority Christian nations in Asia, with over 85% of its population Roman Catholic. That entire religious history began in the shadow of Leyte's southern coast. Then, in 1543, a Spanish expedition, led by Luis López de Villalobos, arrived at Leyte. The island was known locally as Tandaya, but the Lobos didn't call it Tandaya. He renamed it. He called it Filipina, in honor of Philip II, who was then the Crown Prince of Spain. That name, Filipina, was later applied to the entire archipelago. The Philippines, the name of a nation of over 110 million people today, it was born right here on the Leyte. Spanish colonization deepened when Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrived in 1565. The Spanish established settlements, built missions, imposed taxation, the full colonial machinery. And here's a small detail I find genuinely hilarious. In the early years of colonial mapping, Spanish cartographers actually labeled Leyte as Ceylon on official maps. Ceylon, as in Sri Lanka, which is about 4,000 miles away. Spanish mapmakers were apparently not having their best year. By the 1700s, official colonial records showed 38 Spanish Filipino families alongside 7,678 native families on the island. The Waray people converted to Christianity, but they remained one of the last Filipino ethnic groups to fully retain indigenous practices alongside their new religion. In a lot of respects, Leyte found a way to be both things at once, colonial and indigenous, Catholic and ancestral, transformed and yet still deeply itself. And so the centuries passed. Spain, then the Americans arrived in 1898 after the Spanish-American War, then the Japanese in 1941. Each wave of power washed over this island that had already survived 50 million years of geological fury and thousands of years of human history. And then came the moment that would make Leyte famous to the entire world. October 20th, 1944. Or back where we started this video. But now you know the context. You know what this place is. And it was about to be at the center of history one more time. General Douglas MacArthur had been forced to flee the Philippines in March of 1942 as Japanese forces swept through the archipelago. He left under direct orders from President Roosevelt. He didn't want to go. And as he departed on PT-41, he made a vow. 3 words. I shall return. Not we, not the United States, I. It was deliberate, personal, and it became one of the most famous promises in military history. 2.5 years later, October 20th, 1944, MacArthur waded ashore at Red Beach on Leyte's eastern coast, near the town of Paulo. He stepped up to a microphone. He said, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." That broadcast went out across the Pacific. It wasn't just news. It was the signal to every Filipino under Japanese occupation, liberation was coming. Hold on. Japan wasn't done. Not even close. The Japanese military launched Operation Shown 1, a massive, desperate naval counterattack designed to destroy the American invasion fleet before it could unload its troops and supplies. What they set in motion was, by most historical measures, the largest naval battle ever fought in the history of the world. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, October 23rd to 26th, 1944. Over 200,000 naval personnel involved, hundreds of warships, multiple simultaneous engagements spread across hundreds of miles of Philippine waters, the Sibuyan Sea, the Surigao Strait, off the coast of Samar, and at Cape Engano. American, Australian, and Japanese fleets fighting in several engagements at the same time in what became an utterly chaotic, brutally intense 4-day struggle. Picture it. Massive battleship main guns firing through the night, lighting up the Surigao Strait like lightning in a bottle. Destroyers racing through shell splashes at 35 knots, birding warships illuminating the water for miles around. The Battle of Surigao Strait, part of the larger Leyte Gulf engagement, was the last time in history that battleships fought battleships in a traditional line of battle engagement. The last of its kind ever. And during those 4 days, something happened that had never happened before in warfare. Japanese pilots began deliberately flying their aircraft, loaded with bombs and fuel, directly into American warships. Not by accident, on purpose, by choice. This was the first organized use of kamikaze attacks in history. pilots who volunteered to die. It was terrifying and devastating in a way that Allied commanders struggled to comprehend, because you can't negotiate with a weapon that is also a willing human being. The United States won the Battle of Leyte Gulf decisively. The Japanese Navy was so crippled by losses in ships, aircraft, and experienced crews that it never again sailed in comparable strength. Its surviving vessels were eventually stranded in port for lack of fuel. The Battle of Leyte Gulf effectively ended Japan as a functioning naval power. The Pacific War was not officially over, but it was effectively decided, right here. But winning the battle didn't mean Leyte was free overnight. The land campaign on the island lasted until December of 1944. Over 15,500 American soldiers were killed or wounded. Japanese military losses were over 49,000. And Leyte civilians, the Waray people, the descendants of Datu Ete's kingdom, the inheritors of 10,000 years of civilization, they endured it all. The liberation came at tremendous cost. So now, finally, we can answer the question this video opened with. Why Leyte? Why did MacArthur choose this specific island for the return? Strategically, its wide, accessible gulf, its central position in the archipelago, the ability to project military force in every direction from one beachhead. But also, this island, of all the islands, had earned it. It had been at the center of everything. It still was. But the story of Leyte doesn't end in 1944. Not even close. Fast forward to November 8th, 2013. Super Typhoon Haiyan, known locally as Yolanda, makes landfall with sustained winds of up to 315 kilometers per hour. For reference, that is one of the strongest tropical cyclones ever recorded anywhere on Earth. The storm surge, a wall of water pushed to shore by the typhoon, reached 5 meters in height. 5 meters. That's taller than the ceiling of most buildings. Tacloban takes the worst of it. That ancient city, built on the site of Datu Ete's Mayriteet, the capital of a civilization over 1,000 years old, is devastated in a matter of hours. 90% of the city is destroyed. More than 6,000 people are killed across the Philippines. Over 16 million people are affected. It is the deadliest typhoon in Philippine history. And then, because this is Leyte, and this is what Leyte does, something remarkable happened. International aid poured in from across the world. Military relief operations from 40 nations. Relief workers from every continent. Same geographic position that made Leyte a strategic prize in 1944 made it a focal point for the greatest international humanitarian response the Philippines had ever seen. Communities rebuilt. Tacloban recovered. The island that had already survived 50 million years of geological fury, colonial conquest, and the largest naval battle in history, it got back up again. Because the Waray people, those descendants of Austronesian seafarers who crossed open ocean without instruments, they have a cultural resilience that consistently leaves outside observers speechless. So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. Why Leyte? Out of 7,641 islands, why this one? Because Leyte wasn't chosen by history. Leyte was built for it. 50 million years of tectonic force created an island at the exact geographic crossroads of the Pacific, at the center of the archipelago, at the hinge point of Asia in the open ocean. It was forged from the ocean floor by 50 million years of tectonic rage, one of the most geologically complex zones on the planet, still building itself today. It was settled by Austronesian seafarers thousands of years ago, who built kingdoms, traded with China, and created cultures layered enough to survive everything that came after. It gave the Philippines its name, literally, when a Spanish expedition called it Filipina in 1543. It was where Ferdinand Magellan first found rest on his circumnavigation, where the first Catholic Mass in Philippine history was celebrated, where one general's personal promise became one of the most iconic moments of World War II, and where the largest naval battle in human history decided the fate of the Pacific. That is the origin of Leyte. Not just rock and soil, not just latitude and longitude. It is a place that has been at the intersection of geology, human migration, colonial empire, and global war, century after century, as if the universe itself keeps returning to this spot. And the people who live there, they didn't just survive all of that, they shaped it. If this landed for you, if you feel like you just learned something that most people genuinely don't know, do me a favor and share it. Put it in front of someone who loves history, because this is the kind of story that deserves more than a paragraph in a textbook. And honestly, it deserves more than one video. And if you want to keep going, if you want the full origin story of how all the Philippine Islands formed, the ancient Hindu-Buddhist kingdoms that existed here before Spain ever arrived, and the lost history that colonial maps tried to erase, that video's coming next. You don't want to be there for that one, I am serious. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.